So I want to start this morning with a story. This is a family story. Ah, my family, they came. All right.
Guess who showed up in the family?
All right. I gotta change the story now. So every family has stories that you kind of look back on, and I'm always intrigued by stories. And this is a story that is from the 30s. And this is the way I got the story and I understood the story, so it might be a little different than how it had happened. But in the 30s, there was a boy in his teens. He got really sick, like really, really sick. And he needed to be taken to the hospital. But his body was so stiff, they couldn't take him in a stretcher down the stairs. They had to take him out a window. They took him to the hospital, and they determined that he had a really bad prognosis, but the best chance he had was if he had a blood transfusion from someone that had just the right blood characteristics. So a bunch of boys from his church lined up, and they said, well, we'll be tested. And sure enough, one of those boys, the blood lined up, and they hooked him up for a direct transfusion, and the boy lived. And in fact, Bob lived into his 90s. A tremendous story. And when I think about that story, I think, I want to be one of those boys that said, yes, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll go and do that. A tremendous story of being willing to sacrifice, of being willing to do this tremendous thing. I was thinking about this story this last week. And I was sitting in the living room, busy, thinking with my phone, doing important things. I don't know if it's hill climb or it's what, I don't know. I was doing something important. And Cindy came in and said, I'd like to talk to you. And I looked up, and she didn't need a blood transfusion, and she didn't need to go to the hospital. So I couldn't really do anything to demonstrate significant love, so I kept working on what I was doing, and I listened, half listening. Which is ridiculous, right? I don't think I'm the only... Thank you, Georgia. So I don't think that I'm the only one that does that sort of stuff, in which we think the only way that I can really show love are these significant things, and then overlook what seems like little things. One of my favorite cartoons is, do you mind if I strap your phone to my forehead so I can at least pretend like you're looking at me when I talk? Right? It says that sort of thing. But I want to think a little bit this morning about the language that we speak, the love languages that we speak. So this is taken from, some of these ideas are taken from a book by Gary Chapman, which I would recommend. It's an interesting book. But that we have different ways that we can convey love. So think about languages. So if, say, hypothetically, you're at a parts counter, and some guy comes in who speaks a different language, and he's like, and the guy at the parts counter is, I don't understand what you're saying. And instead of getting out a parts book and saying, why don't you just point to what you want, he just keeps saying, what do you want? Louder and louder. And so the guy who's ordering stuff is in his own language, and the guy at the counter is just shouting, what do you want? It doesn't work, right? You need to speak the right language. Well, maybe sometimes that's the way it is with love. That maybe sometimes we have a set way in which we think that we should demonstrate love or speak love, and the person that we're trying to love doesn't hear it in that language. Well, think about that some more. Because I think when we look at the life of Jesus, we see that Jesus demonstrates love in a number of different ways. Let's take a look at John chapter 13, verses 31 through 35. Now, we've been working our way through Genesis. We're taking a break this week. So just a little bit of context on John chapter 13. This is after the triumphal entry, in which Jesus is kind of preparing the disciples for what's coming, that the cross is coming. And this is something that Jesus shares. It's very important. John chapter 13, verses 31 through 35. When he was gone, Jesus said, now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will glorify the Son in himself and will glorify him at once. My children, I will be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I tell you now, where I am going, you cannot come. A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. This provides a basis for our understanding of love. There's a couple of things that are important. First of all, is that this is not on our own strength. Our love for each other isn't just waking up and saying, I'm going to love this person more than ever. It's based on Jesus' love for us. Jesus is commanding love one another based on the fact that they are his disciples. That they have said, yes, Jesus is my forgiver. Jesus is my leader. My life is different. A critical aspect of being able to love is knowing the love of Jesus and being transformed and changed from the inside and not getting the order messed up and just kind of forcing ourselves to do some sort of superficial love, but knowing the love of Jesus. So there's one piece. Another piece that I think is interesting is Jesus says that this is a new commandment. A new command I give you, love one another. Now, I don't think this is the first time we've been told to love in the Bible. I have a few references here. Deuteronomy 6:5. That was one that was repeated over and over again in Jewish households. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Leviticus 19:18. Love your neighbor. Exodus chapter 20, Deuteronomy chapter 5. We have the 10 Commandments, which are framed within covenant, which essentially God is saying, since you love me, these are the things that you will do, framed in a framework of love. Doesn't sound overly new, unless you think of the depth of the model of Jesus. Jesus provides an example in which he is getting ready to go to the cross, which is an example of love which is far beyond what has been grasped before. It's the depth of God's love for us. And Jesus is saying, this is the command I'm giving you. Love according to the example that I am setting. I want to think about that example this morning by looking at some different snapshots of Jesus' life. And therefore thinking about different love languages that we can use to communicate love to those around us. Okay, let's give this a shot. First one, encouraging words. Anybody recognize this guy? Samuel Clemens. Ooh, he doesn't even say Mark Twain. He's breaking out Samuel Clemens. Whew. All right, that's right. I can live for 2 months on a good compliment. And I think, boy, that's true. I'm affected by words. And so that's big. So I'm like, oh yeah. But Mark Twain is not exactly the bastion of Christian thought. So let's take a look at something more significant. Matthew chapter 19. Then people brought little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and pray for them. But the disciples rebuked them. Jesus said, let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. How is this a compliment to little children? How are these encouraging words?
He acknowledges him as the little children as teachable.
Yeah, he acknowledges their value. In which, in that culture, is very different. It's different than our culture. Our culture, we ooh and ah over babies and children. In that culture, it was kind of a burden to have kids. It was expensive when you didn't have hardly enough to eat to begin with. It was very different. And so for Jesus to say, boy, there's tremendous value with these kids, that was a huge compliment. And also, Jesus suspended complaints. He didn't say, let the little children come to me as long as you take care of their snotty noses first. I think that's what I would think. I have issues with snot. And so, but Jesus doesn't give that complaint. He says, let the little children come to me. And how it's said is so important. Think about, because I envision Jesus saying, let the little children come to me. Think about how much different it would be if Jesus said, let the little children come to me. It's different how it's said. Now think about our lives and how we say things. We can say the right thing, but not say it in a Jesus way. Encouraging words aren't just the words that we say, but how we say them. Now, when we think about encouraging words, encouraging kind of points out the idea of inspiring courage, of giving people courage. It's not just a superficial, build you up sort of thing, but it's inspiring true courage. This is an application week. There's going to be a bunch of lists. So here's a list I want you to make this week. When someone says something encouraging to you, write it down. It'll help you remember that encouraging things are being said to you. And it'll also help you remember encouraging words to say to others. If we know that something is encouraging to us, there's a good chance that if we share that truthfully with someone else, it's going to have a significant impact. It is a way to speak a language of love. Okay. There's a story behind this. Now, many of you remember Bill Thompson. I loved getting together with Bill. If there was someone who had encouraging words, it was Bill. I would go down and Bill would say, what's new on the hill? And so I would say what we're doing up here and what's going on. And quite a few times he would say, I'll tell you what, as a pastor, you are doing a bang-up job. I have no idea what that means. I get a picture of a large man slamming a car with a hammer, you know? I'm doing a bang-up job. But I knew there was something good. I looked it up on dictionary.com. They don't help me much. But it's the idea of those words and how they were said meant so much to me. That's the sort of encouraging love language that we can have. All right, the next language is presence. Remember at the end of the book of Matthew, where Jesus is giving the Great Commission, it all ends with, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. Jesus is giving this impossible task to his disciples. He's saying, I'm going to leave you, but here, this is your impossible task to do, but I am with you. My presence is with you always. And not just a passive sort of presence, but very active. And I wonder how active my presence is with the people in my life. I gave the example of the phone already, so I've given away how I'm not perfect at that. Think about, what activities do people like to do in our lives? A spouse, children, friends, co-workers. What are things that they like to do that I could do with them? Make another list and do one of those each week. It's a way to show that we appreciate people, our love for people. Now, something with these pictures that explains how to do this well. Does anyone recognize the picture on the far side? It's supposed to be the Dead Sea. All right? Okay, so think about the Dead Sea. It is dead, right? Nothing lives in it. It's just kind of, bleh, it's there. I mean, you can float in it, but other than that, I mean, what great things. Think about how we can be the Dead Sea when we do activities with people, in which we're physically there, but there's not a whole lot of life going on. We're not engaged. We're not like interacting. We're just sort of, all right? On the other side, you have the babbling brook, all right? Think about when we're with people and we talk. And we talk. And don't allow the other person to talk. Don't allow the other person to participate. It's kind of two opposite extremes in which if we were going to give a gift of presence, of loving other people, I think that follows the model of Jesus, not just a Dead Sea and not just a babbling brook of talking at people. Gift of presence. Next, gifts. This part of the story took place just before Jesus gave the words to the disciples in John chapter 13 that we read. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. How is this a gift? It's a service. Yeah, it's a gift of service.
It's giving your best to him.
Ooh, giving your best. Yes, this was a very expensive gift. This wasn't some sort of cheap perfume that she was trying to get rid of. Right? This was something of immense value. Yeah.
It was showing her love.
Oh, now that's interesting. It was a demonstration of her love, and it was in front of other people also. It was a public sort of thing of, yes, this is, I love you, in the presence of others. Mm-hmm.
You know that they got during that time?
Right? Yeah, and so it was something that was good also. People needed to wash their feet. That's right. So when we think about gifts, we think, who doesn't like a gift? My family. All right? So 2 weeks ago, we went to Tennessee. And I gave a tremendous gift to my family. I'm tearing up even thinking about this. I saw some signs for this, and then we came around the corner and I saw this. Do you recognize what this is? It's not a sewage treatment plant, but close. That makes me sad, Helen. You've described that to me. You know, and it's not a milk plant, but it does have something to do with food. It's Bush's Baked Beans. It was their first plant. There's a Bush's Baked Beans general store and museum, and there's a cafe. I kid you not. And so we're driving down, I see the roller slam on the brakes, reel into the parking lot, and my family says, "You have got to be kidding us." And so we jump out of the van, and there's an aroma about those bean plants that's interesting. And so I'm excited, running all around, saying, "Oh, this is great, what a great gift for my family." And they're like, "No pictures? Don't let anybody see us?" And unfortunately, things closed too soon to be able to get a full tour, but what a great gift, right? No. Now, if we're going to give a gift, it's for the other person, not ourselves. We're usually pretty good at justifying giving a gift because we like that gift. Now, something like ridiculous like this is easy, but sometimes giving a gift that doesn't cost us much, or giving a gift that we would have done anyway, sometimes a little bit too easy to do. Here's a picture of the gift of service Jesus gave. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that was wrapped around him. This was a gift of service that was well beneath Jesus. A gift of service that he really didn't have to do, but he chose to. There was a lot of symbolism with this, but it's also a measure of love. Big surprise on this. Make a list. Think about gifts that you can give to people. And give a gift. One more. Gift of sacrifice. This was our call to worship this morning. You see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. A way that we show love is by modeling the depth of Christ's love, and that of sacrifice. A story that has struck me quite deeply is a story that Corrie ten Boom told about a man with burned hands. She was in Africa, and at the meetings that she was having, a guy came to the meeting, hands all wrapped up. And she said, "Oh, what happened to your hands? And he said, my neighbor's hut was on fire. And I helped put the fire out, and in that process, my hands got burned. I thought, well, that's quite a sacrifice. A little while later, Corrie ten Boom found out the whole story. This man whose hands were burned, his hut was on fire first. His neighbor hated him. His neighbor had lit his house on fire while his wife and children were inside. He fought the fire, he got the fire out on his own hut, his own house, but the sparks had spread back to the neighbor's house, the hating neighbor. And rather than just saying, phew, that guy's getting what he deserves, he fought that fire to the point of burning his own hands. That is sacrifice. On the one hand, I think about that story that I told at the beginning of, the blood transfusion thing. That sort of sacrifice I'm into. But a sacrifice that requires burning hands for people who don't deserve my love, that's hard. I think about simple things of how I am at sacrifice. And one is, how am I at sacrifice when people have toothpaste all over the counter in the bathroom and my gut ends up with a toothpaste streak across it? How am I at sacrifice when those daily bothersome things happen? Or how am I at sacrifice when the person behind me is emphatically sharing with me how I should pull out in front of oncoming traffic? Or how am I at sacrifice when I haven't had enough sleep and my day is not going well? That's the picture on the bottom. That's a day not going well. All right, that's not a normal day. And the last one, how am I when I need to give up a goal? When I need to give up something that I've dreamed about because the people closest to me are more important than my dream or my goal. Sacrifice. Again, make a list. What is something that I can give up for the sake of others? Maybe it's not getting upset about toothpaste on my gut. Or maybe it's something that might cost us to get burned. To love those people who are unlovable. Love is a choice. You know what Jesus didn't say in John chapter 13, or Jesus did not exemplify throughout his life that we should love when we feel like it, or that we should love when other people deserve it, but that love is a commandment. I need to love less attention. Not love because it draws attention to myself. Not love because it has just a feel good about it. But to love others more. To follow Jesus' example of loving people in different circumstances, with different languages. To honestly think about it.